Hello everyone, and welcome to my Dawntrail guide for Astrologian. With the new expansion came not only a new set of highly impactful skills, but also a major change to how one of Astrologian's core components, the card system, functions. As such, there are a lot of things to cover on this job, and we will be exploring the different facets, from the basics of how Astrologian abilities function, to intermediate concepts of how the job's gameplay is structured and smart healing practices, all the way to the more advanced concepts such as choosing card targets and how Astrologian complements the other healers. Finally, I'll close with my overall thoughts on how the job feels in its present state. Let's get to it. Before we begin talking tooltips, I think it is important to make a quick distinction between the two different types of actions Astrologian has access to. Actions listed as spells share a recast timer, often called the global cooldown, or GCD for short. Most spells come with a cast time, which requires you to stand still to successfully cast the spell. Other spells will not have cast times, and you are free to move while the recast timer is going. The second type of actions are called abilities, and they do not share a recast timer with your spells, instead operating on their own internal cooldown. These are often called off-global cooldowns for that reason, or OGCDs, and they can be used whenever you are not actively casting a spell. With that covered, let's start talking about the various spells and abilities Astrologian has access to. Malefic is our basic damage spell and should be used in single target situations below level 94 and in 2 target situations afterward. Combust is an instant cast that applies a 30-second damage over time effect and is stronger than Malefic if it lasts at least half of its duration. Gravity is our AoE damage spell, and it is a gain over Malefic if used on 2 or more targets below level 94, and 3 or more at and above 94. Astral Draw and Umbral Draw will each pull a predetermined set of cards that you will be able to play with the 3 play buttons. At level 70, you will unlock Minor Arcana, which adds Lord of Crowns and Lady of Crowns to the respective Astral and Umbral card sets, along with their own play button. When you first join an instance, the Astral set will already be drawn and ready to be used. When either of the draw abilities are used, they will transform into the other draw ability and go on a 55-second cooldown. Each card has its own unique effects, but the two most important will be played alongside Divination, a 6% party damage increase that can be followed up with Oracle, a massive 860 potency ability. The cards Balance and Spear further increase their recipient's damage dealt for 15 seconds, depending on their role. Balance increases melee and tank damage by 6%, and other rolls by 3%, while the Spear increases caster, physical ranged, and healer damage by 6% and 3% for tank and melee. The Arrow increases healing received by 10% for its duration, while the Bowl reduces damage taken by 10%. Spire places a shield on a party member, and the Ewer grants a regen effect to its target. Benefic 1 and Benefic 2 are your basic healing single target spells, and useful for low-level dungeons where you do not have access to the rest of your toolkit, but their usefulness decreases quickly as you unlock the other skills. Do note that while Benefic has a trait that guarantees a critical hit on your next Benefic 2, it is never mathematically worth it to use Benefic over Benefic 2. Aspected Benefic has a small initial heal, but also applies a regen to the target, making it far more efficient healing spell than Benefic 2. Celestial Intersection provides a small heal with a shield that comes on top of it, whereas Essential Dignity provides a basic cure that grows stronger as the target's HP decreases. Exaltation reduces the damage taken by the party member and provides a small heal at the end of the effect. Moving into party healing, Helios is your basic party heal, restoring 400 potency, that is far outshined by Aspected Helios and its upgrade Helios Conjunction, which restores slightly less HP initially but have a regen attached that quickly outpaces Helios in efficiency. Similar to Aspected Helios and Helios Conjunction, Celestial Opposition is also an AoE party regen, but it does not require a GCD to be used, making it significantly better. Collective Unconscious will reduce damage taken by 10%, while also applying a small regen. The bubble can be held, but moving will cancel the effect early. Earthly Star is placed on the arena and can be manually detonated to deal a small amount of damage to enemies and heal for a small amount. If left for 10 seconds, it will enter a buff state, increasing both the healing and damage dealt. You can manually detonate it, or it will detonate automatically after sitting in the buff state for 10 seconds. Macrocosmos is a spell that deals damage to all nearby enemies with a small amount of falloff. It also applies a buff that will compile all damage taken for the duration, and once the effect ends or when it's reactivated, it will heal for half the amount plus a small bit. Horoscope applies a buff that will heal the party for 200 potency after 10 seconds, or when you manually trigger it. You can also use an aspected Helios, a Helios conjunction, or a Helios to trigger an effect that will double the heal potency for it and extend out the duration of the buff to 30 seconds. Nutrasect will increase all your helium GCDs by 20% for 20 seconds. It also causes Aspected Benefic, Aspected Helios, and Helios Conjunction to also apply a shield in addition to their usual effects. At level 100, you can follow this up with Sun Sign, which provides a 10-second party mitt for 15 seconds. Healer role actions are also an essential part of Astro's core gameplay. Lucid Dreaming will restore MP gradually over time, allowing you to make sure that you have enough mana to be able to heal the party and deal damage as much as possible. Surecast is used to prevent you from being knocked back and also allows you to cast spells without interruption from other debuffs. Swift Cast will instantly cast to the next spell regardless of cast time, which is very helpful if you ever need to use Ascend, which will resurrect a party member but comes with an 8-second cast time. SNL will remove debuffs from party members as long as they have this little blue line over the top of them. Rescue will draw a party member to your side, and Repose is much more niche, putting a target to sleep. Astrologian's final two abilities are Lightspeed and Sinistry. Lightspeed will reduce all cast times by 2.5 seconds, making most of your spells instant casts and reducing Ascend to 5.5 seconds, which is very useful for when you need to chain reses or when Swift Cast is on cooldown. Lightspeed comes with charges and has a 60-second cooldown. Sinistry, on the other hand, is far less useful. It places a buff on a party member that causes them to receive 40% of the initial heal of your single target healing spells for the duration. The problem is this essentially means it only gets buffed off of Aspected Benefic, Benefic 2, and Benefic 1. 3 spells that you very rarely end up using, so the ability ends up going to waste more often than not. Now that we understand what each individual action does, it is time to look at how all of it fits together as a cohesive whole. One of our goals is to make sure Divination is used on cooldown so that it aligns with other buffs party members may have. This is because damaged buffs are multiplicative, meaning that if we were to stack our 6% Divination alongside other 5% buffs, like say, a Monk's Brotherhood, a Ninja's Mug, a Dancer's Technical Finish, and a Pictomancer's Starry Muse, the result will be 3% greater than the sum of each of the individual buffs. Our end goal is to put as many of our high damage abilities and damage buffing cards inside of this mega buff window duration. It is especially important to make sure both cards get played in the first 5 seconds of the buff window to ensure that their 15-second duration sits nicely inside the 20-second buff window. We need to use a Lightspeed to ensure we have enough weaves to accomplish this, so we must make sure that we have at least one of the 2 charges available a few seconds before Divination comes off cooldown. Our burst windows and opener will look something like this. We will place Star around 4 to 5 seconds before the buff window starts. We make sure Lightspeed is pressed within 2 GCDs of when we are ready to push Divination. After a GCD, we immediately press both Divination and the balance in that order, GCD again before Lords of Crowns, and pressing Umbral Draw to gain access to the Spear. After another GCD, we will play the Spear immediately to ensure that its 15-second duration falls within the rest of Div. Oracle can be used at any time for the remainder of the burst window. A small trick that you see here is that you can use a Combust at the very end of the opener to ensure that you get another damage over time effect that is snapshotted underneath all of the damage buffs of the burst window. Outside of burst windows, our main goals are to keep Earthly Star on cooldown so that it stays aligned with Divination, and make sure we use Draw once within 9 seconds of it coming off of cooldown, to make sure that our next Umbral Draw is ready right after we play Lord of Crowns during burst windows. The rest of the time we will be using Malefic Spam for damage, and keeping Combust uptime on the boss. I won't be going over specific keybinds since in the end they are down to personal comfort and what works for one person may be very awkward for others. This will basically be a list of actions that should be easily accessible and easy to press while moving. Malefic, Compust, and Gravity should all be very easy to get to since they should be making up most of the spells you cast. I would recommend Celestial Intersection and Essential Dignity to be within easy reach as well. Draw and Play 1 should also be close at hand since you'll need to press them very quickly during your burst phases. I personally like having Earthly Star nearby, and having Swift Cast and Lightspeed readily accessible for when you need to move long distances can be very beneficial. Aspected Benefict is good to have on hand if you run primarily dungeons, and Helios Conjunction should likewise be somewhere you can quickly get to. The rest of your cooldowns can be placed wherever you find comfortable. If you are finding keeping track of Divination and Draw's cooldown is difficult, it's not a bad idea to put them on a hotbar toward the center of the screen so you can track them easier. If you find yourself needing hotbar space and looking for skills to remove, my recommendations would be to get rid of Benefict 1, Sinistry, Repose, and Benefict 2 if you are really desperate, since these are the least useful for general gameplay, especially at higher levels. For new healers, it is often first instinct to ensure the party is at 100% HP all the time. And while this isn't a bad mentality to have at first, Astrologian's healing kit is special because it relies heavily on the idea of healing over time, or with delayed healing. Take Celestial Opposition for instance. It gives 200 potency of initial healing and 100 regen potency for 15 seconds. What this means is that for the duration of the regen, you will receive the regen potency every 3 seconds, making Celestial Opposition heal for a total of 700 potency, since you will receive the regen effect 5 times over the duration, in addition to the initial heal of 200. And for reference, this is how all regen effects work in Final Fantasy XIV. So if, for instance, you were to follow up a Celestial Opposition with a Helios that would top everyone's HP afterwards, you would have wasted the last 4 instances of healing that would have done the same amount of healing as Helios, while spending a spell on what could have been a damaged GCD. As much as you are a healer, your ability to contribute to damage and kill dungeon adds, bosses, and more will stop people from taking damage later down the line. Think of it as preventative medicine. By maximizing the effectiveness of your off-global cooldown healing kit, it is possible to spend most of your spells in a given time frame on damage spells. For instance, in the first trial of Dawntrail, there is a mechanic where the party takes repeated stack damage until you kill 3 adds. If the healers just heal and don't help with killing them, you may end up taking 3 or even 4 more sets of damage than if all 8 players are contributing to damage. Learning how to work around Earthly Star's heal is especially important because you should be using it as it comes off cooldown for damage. But if you don't need to heal immediately and Star is currently on the ground, it's generally a good idea to wait until the Star is fully cooked before using it to heal up the group. This lets you save other tools for later when you might otherwise have had to use a Helios Conjunction instead. It is also perfectly fine to use Horoscope as only a 200 potency heal. You do not always have to accompany it with a GCD healing spell like you do with White Mage's Plenary Indulgence. While it might sound scary at first, practicing trimming down on unnecessary healing is an important aspect of good healer play in this game. I have often heard that people find dungeon healing intimidating on Astrologian when they first pick up the job, due to the wide amount of abilities you have, and knowing how to use them effectively requires a little forethought. However, almost all dungeons follow a similar formula of 2 add packs and then a wall, 2 more add packs and then another wall, a boss, and then repeat it all twice. As a result of this type of design, we can do some rough planning on where we want to use our various cooldowns. Since the average dungeon party will take about 30 to 40 seconds to kill a trash pack after the tank finishes grouping them together, we can estimate that we will have all of our 1 minute long cooldowns for every trash pack. General gameplay flow should be apply and combust to the adds while the tank is grouping up the pack. Giving an aspected benefit while moving between packs is fine if you need to use your GCD. Once the adds are grouped, this is where we want to drop an Earthly Star and start spamming Gravity while using Exaltation, Celestial Intersection, Essential Dignity, healing cards, as well as all the rest of your AoE healing tools, since they double as tank healing in trash packs. Be mindful of when your star is fully cooked for an extra burst of healing and damage. Do not forget to use divination and trash bowls, as killing the adds faster will reduce the amount of healing you need to do. Macrocosmos gets a special mention here since it is both a massive chunk of AoE damage that also works as a healing to full button for the tank whenever they drop low. Just remember to use it relatively early into the ad pack, so that it can store up as much damage as possible before you use it. As for dungeon bosses, they generally do not deal that much damage and can be handled easily with a wide variety of healing abilities you have. Tank damage is also laughably low in most dungeon bosses and can be handled quite easily with a few off-global cooldowns. Healing in Trials and Raids is similar to healing a dungeon boss. They tend to hit slightly harder than dungeon bosses and have more complex mechanics that will kill people more often. Damage to the tanks tends to be more spread out, and there is a greater focus on raid-wide attacks. The biggest difference here is that in 8-man content, you will have access to the LB3, which on Healer will resurrect all dead party members and heal them to full without receiving a weakness debuff. Keep this in mind because it might save a run if most of the group dies. In addition, you will have a co-healer to help you keep the party healthy and assist with rezzing dead party members. Keep in mind that it is possible to have both healers cast a raise on the same party member, which wastes MP. This is where it's important to be mindful of what your co-healer is doing. Since communication is limited in Duty Finder and Party Finder, it is vital to be watching for how much healing your co-healer is putting towards certain raid-wides and shift your healing tools accordingly. It is also good to be aware of how each of the other healers heal. White Mage heals in large bursts with very little to offer when it comes to party mitigation, whereas Scholar tends to heal in small bites and relies heavily on a plethora of mitigation abilities and large shields. Sage ends up somewhere in between, having a mix of regen burst heals with access to small shields and its own suite of party mitigation. My best advice for learning how to work with other healers is to either talk with them if you have access to it in a static environment, or to play the other healers and get a small grasp of how their toolkit works, or go watch a guide and try to understand what tools they have access to and how they want to be using them. Choosing who your damage cards go to in dungeons is quite easy since there are only 2 DPS in a party, and most of the time you have 1 melee and 1 range. If you do get 2 melee, it is better to stack both the balance and the spear on the higher damage melee, while if you have 2 ranged, the balance should go to the tank and the spear to the higher damage range. In 8-person duties where you'll have more options of DPS to card, we must take other factors into account. Gear, player skill, weakness, and dance partner are all things that should influence who you card. However, assuming all these factors are equal, the card priority is as follows: Sam and Ninja, followed by Monk and Viper, with a little bit of nuance because you rarely want to card a Viper in the opener, while Monk is significantly better at both the 0 and the 6-minute burst. After that, Dragoon and Reaper are roughly equal, with Reaper's opener being worse than Dragoon's opener. Ranged priority is Pictomancer, then Summoner, then Machinist, Red Mage, Bard, Black Mage, and finally Dancer. Finally, I want to give some of my personal thoughts on Dawntrail Astrologian, how it feels to play and where it sits in relation to other healers. And it feels good to play. The core healing tools remained intact, which I am very happy for, since Earthly Star is one of my favorite abilities in the game. With Macrocosmos becoming potency neutral again, and Sun Sign helping to fill gaps in mitigation, the job feels very complete. And while I miss being able to card DPS during their 1-minute burst back in Endwalker, as well as the flexibility of 30-second draw, the new cards still capture the fast weaving and burst windows, even if the skill of quickly deciding who is getting a card is less important now, since you can basically decide your card targets in advance. Changing the cooldown of draw from 60 seconds on Dawntrail launch to 55 seconds in the first job patch removes basically all possibility of drifting cards outside of burst windows, and also gives some flexibilities to which spell speed high level Astro can run. Whereas before you were basically locked to either 2.5, 2.4, or 2.3 GCD to ensure you could press draw right as it came off of cooldown, we can now basically run whatever speed we want to. As for the other cards, I have found them to be very useful in dungeons, especially at lower levels where before you did not have as many off-global cooldown tank heals. The Bowl and Ewer are particularly good. I have enjoyed being able to stack the Bowl, Sun Sign, and Exaltation on a tank to offer them a truckload of mitigation when their cooldowns run dry, or give one tank Exaltation and the other tank Bowl during dual tank busters. Ewer, being a free aspected benefit, offers a nice bit of single target sustained healing that I have found to be useful even in 8-man content, where tanks have historically been pretty self-sufficient. The Spire, on the other hand, feels very underwhelming by comparison. Once you unlock Celestial Intersection, Spire feels like you use it to just use it. The Spear lacks raw power and is the card I tend to use the least. Its most potent use is to place it on a party member that your Scholar plans to Agalopium, which will increase the shield's potency before the Scholar spreads it to the rest of the party. I think it feels especially bad since both of the good feeling healing cards are in the Umbral set, making the Astral set just feel unexciting to draw, and I often will end up using draw without having used either the Spear or Spire. Having Lord and Lady be tied to each card set is a fine change that lets you plan Lady of Crowns into your healing, while making sure Lord of Crowns is in buffs where you want it. Astro's mana economy is solid, having enough that we can get by, although we will run out over extended periods at minimum piety if we have to GCD heal or raise too much. I think this is fine since it acts as a way to encourage you to maximize your free off-global cooldown healing kit and not rely too heavily on GCD heals. The addition of light speed charges is great quality of life if you found movement sections hard on Astro before, and it also makes you the priority healer to hardcast a raise if neither healer has swift cast. As for where Astro stands in the overall meta, it is currently the top healer when it comes to damage output in 8-man content, which I think is fine when you consider that more effort is required from both you and the party to get the most out of divination and your cards. Not to mention that maximizing the job's healing requires more forethought and rewards you for mastering it. I actually like the dynamic of having easier options to play in the healer role, but having there also be a numerical incentive to try the other jobs and get better overall as a player and a healer. And that's all I have to say about Astrologian at this time. Savage is due to release tomorrow as of this video going live, and I am excited to see how the new content changes my perspective on the different jobs. Until then, let me know what you think about Astrologian in the comments, leave a like if you enjoyed this video, and feel free to subscribe if you want to be notified whenever I post once in a blue moon. See you next time!